Hello and welcome to this mini lecture on Philosophies of Education. This presentation complements Chapter 3 in our textbook and highlights four major philosophies: traditional, progressive, existential, and critical. For the purpose of studying the philosophies, we'll make some sharp distinctions between them. In practice, however, there is much crossover and gray area. For instance, we would not expect a person or an education system or even an education curriculum to express only one of these philosophies, but rather a blend of several. Therefore, we might think of the distinctions between philosophies as somewhat artificial and helpful to us as a study tool. As always with philosophy, there is room to debate. So, what is philosophy and what do we mean by a philosophy of education? Philosophy comes from the Greek words philos, meaning love, and sophia, meaning wisdom. Philosophy is an academic discipline in itself, used to critique theories, viewpoints, and systems. Sometimes philosophy is said to help us make sense of the world. I like to say philosophy is a particular way of thinking about the world and approaching problems. A philosophy of education, then, is a particular view or approach to education and used to explore questions such as what is education? What are its purposes and goals? What is an educated person? What do we teach and what is the teacher's role? For our purposes, a philosophy of education is a systematic way to study it. Because we live in a diverse society, there are different philosophies. This presentation and our textbook present four main philosophies of education: traditional, progressive, existential, and critical. Let's begin with a traditional philosophy of education. Much like the name implies, traditional philosophy has its roots in ancient Greek ideas about education. There is a focus on traditional academic subjects such as math, science, social studies, and English language arts. The purpose of school is to transmit cultural knowledge on these subjects and prepare students to function in society. There are two main camps or thoughts in traditional philosophy. Perennialists are those who believe in teaching the classics as timeless truths that do not change. And essentialists are those who believe in adapting traditional academic curriculum to the changing needs and current times. What remains important, though, is the belief in truth, Western canon, and the purpose of education. So, what might these philosophies look like in practice? How would you recognize a traditional philosophy of education in a policy, a program, or a person? You would probably see a standardized curriculum, which means all students receive instruction on the same content. Perennialism would emphasize content with unchanging themes of Western civilization. Essentialism might adapt that content to reflect more contemporary issues. The teacher is viewed as the expert whose job is to transmit meaning to students. Importantly, democratic society is said to depend on this shared common knowledge. Moving on, what are the big ideas about a progressive philosophy of education? Again, like this name implies, a progressive philosophy is a contemporary perspective that emphasizes reform and moving forward. It also tends to be more student-centered rather than subject-focused. So, what does it look like? How would a progressive philosophy of education be expressed by a school system or a teacher or a policy? You would probably see a more student-focused and needs-driven curriculum. This means content would not be the same for all groups of students. Instead, academic content would emphasize preparation for life, which might look different from one community to the next. There might be a breaking away from the emphasis on math, science, social studies, and English language arts to cover other content areas. The teacher's role here is more of a facilitator whose job is to guide student learning. Next, we look at an existential philosophy of education. This philosophy focuses on people's experiences of being. It rejects the idea of objective truth or hard facts and emphasizes human experiences as truth. So, what might this look like? How would an existential philosophy of education be expressed? You would probably see an emphasis on the humanities, such as arts, languages, and social sciences. You might read or hear someone say how their background has influenced their beliefs in education. Students are considered to be unique individuals who will develop their own authentic knowledge about the world. Here, the teacher's role is more about teaching students to create their own ideas about living in the world. Finally, we come to a critical philosophy of education. Like this name implies, a critical philosophy emphasizes power imbalance and school as a method of reproducing a particular ideology. Education is viewed as a political activity that indoctrinates students in the ways of a dominant culture. Teachers can assume the role of change agent and advocates of social justice. So, what might this look like? How would a critical philosophy of education be expressed? You would probably see a questioning or challenging of the notions of Western civilization and how it is reproduced in curriculum. Instead, there might be an emphasis on diverse content and even critical pedagogy. Students are considered to be unique individuals who need to become their own advocates and agents of social change. A democratic society is considered one in which there is a constant struggle between the values and beliefs of different groups. Education is viewed as taking an important part in this struggle. So, in wrapping up this mini lecture, I might ask the question of why we should be interested in philosophies of education. Why do we need them? Well, that's a matter of opinion, right? I think philosophy is important to build an understanding of our education system so that we can critique it with some guiding principles, values, and beliefs. The four main philosophies we touched on in this course, traditional, progressive, existential, and critical, afford us ways to ask and answer questions about education very differently. Being able to critique American education in a systematic way is important to us as students, educators, and citizens. So, before we end this mini lecture, I'll leave you with one final thought. One of the objectives of this course is to develop a personal philosophy of education. I'm going to ask you to write me your one-page statement in a few weeks. So how does that differ from having just an opinion about education? A personal philosophy of education is your systematic approach to the field, guided by a set of principles, values, and beliefs. This system of beliefs will probably reflect some combination of the four philosophies we mentioned here, and perhaps others that we have not studied. By stating what your philosophy of education is, colleagues can better understand you and your actions as a professional.